أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ورضي الله تعالى عن السادة التابعين وعلماء العاملين وأئمة الأربعة المجتهدين ومقلديهم إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فيقول الله تعالى في كتابه يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير صدق الله العظيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته الحمد لله I want to ask and remind all of you to share the video. We made some changes starting today. As of today, we are not streaming directly onto my personal page. We are streaming directly onto my public page, as well as masjidalmumin's page and our YouTube channel. Directly onto my public page. Just check. Samira, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam to barakatuh.
How do I sound?
You sound fine.
Okay. It's kind of hot here.
Stop bragging.
Well, that's right. Y'all freezing. Got the sweat rag. Alhamdulillah. So please share the video. I tried to share it to my personal page so that people can see that where we are. Alhamdulillah. So that's one of the things. So for all of you who are listening, I don't know, Samira, can you find a link to my public page and put it in the comments or put it on the screen or something?
Okay.
I have two pages. I have a personal page. It's Naeem Abdullah. And that's where most of the conversation and the dialogue is taking place at. Most of the time on my private or personal page. But I also have what they call a like page. Obviously, it's the same name, but it just says Imam in front of it. It says Imam Naeem Abdullah. So instead of streaming directly to my personal page now, we're streaming to my like page. The reason why we decided to do that is because StreamYard, the platform we use to stream these videos, when I type in my chat box any information for you, if you were watching from my personal page, you couldn't see what I put in the chat. The only way that you can see it is if I put it on the screen. And so I thought it would be better to do it stream from my public page so that no matter what I type in, everybody who's directly on a live stream can see what I type in the conversation. I've been talking about doing it for a couple of weeks. I made istikhara and I felt firm about doing it after we made istikhara. And so uh, I decided to do it. Now I know how we are. We may lose some people. We may not. Like a lot of times people don't follow instructions. A lot of times different content creators, they complain because if they switch from one platform to the next, it's hard to bring people over because a lot of times people don't pay attention. And a lot of times people don't follow directions. But we wanted to try to be as beneficial as we can to everybody who's in these classes because we are sharing and transmitting a lot of information. So I didn't want anybody who was participating from my personal page to miss any information. Alhamdulillah. So for the rest of this week, we are taking a break from the book Umdatu Bayan. And you know, every time we say we're taking a break, that doesn't mean that we're stopping classes. We're changing classes. So when we resume the book Umdatu Bayan by Sheikh Uthman and Fodio, may Allah envelop him in his mercy, Ameen. We will still be in the Aqidah section. We haven't finished Aqidah yet. There's one more section of Aqidah that we need to finish, the Sam'iyat, of those affairs dealing with the hereafter. And I didn't want to start that from here. I wanted to start that, back in America. So for that reason, we took a pause for the cause, and we are doing black lessons now until I return, inshallah. And then we'll pick back up from where we left off at, and then that to Bayan. Now, my intentions were to finish the entire Aqidah section, then take a break and do these black lessons, but it didn't work out the way I planned. So, alhamdulillah, here we are. Alhamdulillah, I'm starting to see some of y'all come in. Alhamdulillah. So I want to return the greetings to you all. Wa alaikum salam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Abdul Bar, Fatima, Ayub, Khadija, Anthony, and Zakaria. And of course you, Samira. Wa alaikum salam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Please share the page where we at so people know where to find us. Some people probably waiting to get a notification from my private page on my personal page and it ain't coming through. Let them know that we over here. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Abdul Mujib. So today and maybe tomorrow, our black lesson has the title of Understanding the Commonalities and Distinctions between Black Americans and Black Continental Africans. And it is based upon the ayat in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nasu, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila li ta'arrafu. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Inna Allah alimun khabir. Sadaqallahu al-azim. Which means, O mankind, we created you from a male and a female and made you into nations and tribes, shu'uban wa qaba'ila, so that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you is the one who has the most taqwa. And Allah is the all-knowing, all-aware. I want to make a few comments first on some of the words used in that ayat. Allah says that He made us, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا. And shu'uban is like the large category of an ethnic group or a lineage, right? The largest category. And Qaba'il is the category right under it, the smaller category. So in other words, we made you into large tribes and smaller sub-tribes. Allah did that. That's very important for us to understand. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ. And we, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He uses the royal we. We made you. Who is He talking to? Ya ayyuhan nas, all mankind. He's talking to all human beings. We created you from a male and a female. And then we made you, we broke you up, we divided you into larger ethnic groups and smaller tribes. Why? Lead to arafu, so that you may know one another. There's a discussion in the book of Tafsir with that word lead to arafu. Lead to arafu first of all, grammatically speaking, Allah took a ta out of that word. I mean, for lack of better words, that word would normally be tata'arafu, but he took a ta out of it. The ta'arafu. In the structure of the word, it's a fifth form verb. And if you know verbs, you know that the fifth form is usually a reflexive verb. What's a reflexive verb? Meaning the subject is doing it and the subject is also receiving it. It's reflex. Doing it and it's getting done to you. And also, Allah, in the way He made that sentence, He didn't say what you're getting to know. In other words, in the Arabic, it doesn't literally say so that you may know one another. One another is not there in Arabic. There's no object to that subject and verb. This is why when you read it, the English translation, it'll be parentheses or brackets that say one another. Grammatically, what that's telling you, if you take these two things in mind, keep these two things in mind, that this word, this verb, ta'arafu, is both reflective, meaning the one who's doing it is also receiving it, and at the same time, it doesn't have any object. Grammatically, what is being told to you is that Allah did these things, meaning made you from a male and a female, and then created you from a male and a female, and then made you into nations and tribes, so that you may know yourselves and that you may know other than yourselves. And likewise, other people may know themselves and may know other than themselves. In other words, they may know you. So just grammatically looking at that ayat from Quran, and if I didn't mention it before, that's Surah Hujurat, Surah number 49, verse number 13. That portion of the verse where Allah says, Li ta'arafu, is a proof from the Quran that it's an obligation on every person to have knowledge of self. It's an obligation upon every person to have knowledge of self. That's sitting right there in plain sight in the book of Allah. In the chapter dealing with, for the most part, social interactions between people. The chapter called Al-Hujurat, the inner apartments. Allah is telling you, Surah 49, verse 13, that you are, not only is it a good thing, no, that you're supposed to. He created the human race in this fashion for what reason? So that you can know yourself and no other than yourself. And to drive the point home even further, when you look in the books of tafsir, let me ask you all a question. In the English language, if I say tafsir or a book of tafsir, what's the first book of tafsir that comes to your mind? There are a whole bunch of books of tafsir. Well, what book of tafsir are most Americans familiar with? While I'm waiting for you to respond, wa alaikum salam, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Nadam, Imad, Sister Khadija, Farouk, Sister Begum, alhamdulillah. Figure Samira will come saying some stuff. I disagree with you. Samira said Tafsir Jalalain. I disagree with you. But being that you mentioned Tafsir Jalalain, I should mention that some of the tafsir that I've given already on this verse comes straight directly out of Tafsir Jalalain. Everything I just told you about this verse comes from Tafsir Jalalain so far. Farouk said Ibn Kathir. Ahmed said Ibn Kathir. Exactly. By the way, while we're in Tafsir Jalalain, you reminded me, look at my notes, Samira. In Tafsir Jalalain, Walita Arafu, Imam Suyuti, he said, لِيَعْرَفُوا بَعْدَكُمْ بَعْدًا. What he said in Arabic, which means that you may acquire knowledge of the customs of one another. That you may acquire knowledge of each other's customs. Want to translate it culture? However you want to do it. Tafsir Jalalain. Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let's go to Ibn Kathir. If any of you are in this class right now and you have Ibn Kathir, the English, by the way, I would love for you to open it to 49:13. That's if you have it. But if you don't have it near you, don't go out your way. But just remember everything I'm about to tell you. Ibn Kathir says the same thing that I mentioned. He mentions there that so that you can know that such and such is a son, such and such from such and such tribe, or such and such family, etc., etc., etc. And then he quotes a hadith from Tirmidhi and Abi Hurairah radiallahu anhu. عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال تعلموا من أنسابكم ما تصلون به أرحامكم فإن صلة الرحم محبة في الأهل مثرة في المال منسعة في الأثر, which means it has been narrated from Abu Hurairah that the Prophet, may Allah bless him and grant him peace, said, learn enough about your lineage to facilitate keeping your ties of kinship. For indeed, keeping the ties of kinship encourages affection, mahabba, among the family relations, increases wealth, and increases the lifespan. And once again, this hadith can be found in many collections, like the Musnad of Imam Ahmed and others, but the wording is explicitly from Tirmidhi. And depending on which edition you have, it's hadith number 1979. So Ibn Kathir mentions this hadith in his tafsir of that ayah. And the wording of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a command. Ta'allamu min ansabikum. Learn enough about your lineages, ansabikum. Ma tasiluna bihi arhamakum. So that you can connect to your family relations. A command from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to have knowledge of self. Quran, Sunnah, knowledge of self. Very important. 49:13. 49:13. This is very important. Why is it very important? It's very important because anytime Black Muslims come together and we start talking about issues that are relevant and important and essential for our survival and progression, usually this verse is quoted in the opposite meaning of the verses given. Brothers, sisters, there is no white, there is no black, there is only Islam. Please stop this racism stuff, right? That's what they tell you. And they quote this verse. And this verse is explicitly saying the opposite. So in the verse of the Quran itself, when you understand what Allah means by need to arafu, He's telling you that you're supposed to have knowledge of self first and foremost. And then in the commentaries of that word, in that verse, you get a hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam telling you that you're supposed to have knowledge of self. In fact, explicitly ordering you to. Then he gives you the some benefits of having knowledge of self. He gives you 3 benefits. It creates love between you and your relations. It increases wealth. It increases lifespan. SubhanAllah. If you think of everything that's afflicting the Black community in America, you can find that we got a problem with all 3 of these areas. We don't love one another. We have economic problems, and our lifespans are shorter than everyone else. Well, a lot of us probably never even heard of this hadith unless we heard, somebody, very few of us Muslim leaders who are openly pro-Black, you may have heard a few of us quote this hadith, but you ain't going to find anybody else quote this hadith. And if you have Ibn Kathir, the English translation in your house, you ain't going to find that in there either. You're not going to find it unless there's some new edition of the English translation I don't know about. If you know enough Arabic and you have Tafsir Ibn Kathir, I don't care if it's PDF or hard copy in your home, go to 49:13 in the English. You're not going to find this hadith that I just mentioned. Then go to the Arabic if you have it, right? You will find the Arabic of this hadith there. So the translators didn't want you to know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded you to have knowledge of self. In the same way that the translators of Sahih Bukhari didn't want you to know that Imam Bukhari did ta'wil. We're talking about Aqidah in our normal lessons, right? Figurative interpretation. They didn't want you to know Bukhari did that because they say the Salaf didn't do that. And Bukhari was from among the Salaf, at least the early part of the Khalaf, depending on how you define Salaf. You see right in the book of Tafsir in Sahih Bukhari, right? You see Imam Bukhari doing ta'wil, figurative interpretation, something that the Wahhabis say that is you shouldn't be doing. Is denying Allah's attributes, right? And these same guys say Bukhari Muslim, Bukhari Muslim, Bukhari Muslim. and you look right in Bukhari, right, he's doing what they say is denying Allah's attributes. But the translators obviously didn't want you to know that, so they didn't translate that part. So they want you to have a weird belief about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, these same people don't want you to know that you're supposed to have knowledge of self. Because when it comes to the pertinent ayats in the Quran, and these same people translate these tafsirs, they don't translate that part where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded you to have knowledge of self. Ta'allimu min ansabikum. Learn your lineages. Learn about yourself. We're going to teach you that part. If we was editing this video right now, right, you know what clip I'll put in here, right? Right after this part, right? Samira, you know what clip I'll put in there? Can you guess off the top of your head? Oh, Samira, you ain't there? You ain't holding me down? All right, fine. The clip I would put in there would be Denzel Washington playing Malcolm X. You've been had. You've been took. You've been led astray. Run them up. That clip will go right there. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Rahim, Nadir, and Isa. Y'all have any questions about what I mentioned so far? Are there any questions about what I mentioned so far? I'm trying to lay the foundation for what we're going to talk about the rest of today and possibly tomorrow. Any questions about what I mentioned so far? Issa said I was waiting for the other page to go live. See, I ain't on that page no more. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You probably missed it, Issa. I mentioned how today, for our normal classes, I won't be streaming directly onto my regular, my personal page. For the same reason I told y'all, I believe the last couple of weeks, when I'm typing into the chat in the StreamYard, what I type will not show up in the thread on my personal page. Only on YouTube and only on the public pages. Because these classes that we normally do, there's a lot of notes and I'd be doing typing in there. So I don't want anybody to miss anything. So that's why I switched over to my public page. And that's also the reason why I switched over while we're taking this break from to Bayan, our Father Ayn. So for at least a week, while we're doing these black lessons, inshallah, more and more people will get familiar with my public page and will get used to, setting their notifications up and doing whatever you need to do to get notified when we go live, inshallah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Anthony. Alhamdulillah. So nobody has any questions about what I mentioned so far. By the way, Samira, I called for you. You didn't answer. That means you wasn't on your job.
I was speaking to one of your children. I heard you, but they needed my assistance.
Okay, you get a pass. Don't let it happen again. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're talking about today, I think the title I gave it was Understanding the Commonalities, those things we got in common, and those things that we are different, or the distinctions between Black Americans and Black Africans. I'm working to that point, so you need to follow me. So far, what we mentioned is Surah 49, verse number 13. Surah Hujurat, verse number 13. And we gave some commentary on it. Why did we give some commentary on it? Because you're supposed to know your own history. You're supposed to have knowledge of self. And you're supposed to know about other people's history. That's what li ta'arufu means in that verse. You're supposed to know. Ignorance is not bliss. You're supposed to know about yourself. Very important. And so I want to talk about the cause of the break between African and African American. The cause of the break. Or like, and you can really call it how the so-called African American came into existence. There's some key points in history that you need to write down, or at least write down their dates, so you can look them up later for deeper research. The first date I would like you to write down is 7/11, and this is CE. This is not the Hijra calendar, CE, the Common Era or Christian calendar. Anybody know what happened in 7/11? 7/11. What happened? Seven eleven. What happened in the year 7/11? It's important for us to know these dates and what happened during these times. Is anybody out there? Is anybody out there? Is anybody out there? Hello, hello, hello. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Zachariah, Samira, and Hudayfa. Muslims took over Spain. Muslims conquered Spain. Spain. Does anybody know the name of the Amir of the Muslims who entered Spain, the leader of the Muslims who entered Spain? And I hope you're really paying attention, because most of these things I'm going to mention to you, they're usually not mentioned together. So you think one of them has nothing to do with the other, when in reality, one has everything to do with the other. So I hope you're really paying attention. Tariq, Isa mentioned his first name, Tariq. Tariq ibn what? Tariq ibn Zayd. Or is it Ziyad? Is it Zayd or Ziyad? You sure it's Zayd, y'all? Ziyad. Alhamdulillah, shukran. Tariq ibn Ziyad. Let me ask you a question. Who was governing the Muslim world? Let's say who. Was this during the time of the rightly guided caliphs? Was it during the Umayyads? Was it during the Abbasid? When was this? Those of you who are serious about knowledge in general, alhamdulillah, Samira said the Umayyads. If you know about your Islamic history, especially we talked a lot about it during the last time we did black lessons. It was the period of the rightly guided caliphs after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then it was the Umayyads. Then it was the Abbasids. I highly recommend that any serious student of knowledge in your room, your office, your study, or wherever you learn at, that you have a world map on the wall. So that when we talk about places, and when you learn about places, a picture comes to your mind. You see where it's at in relation to where you're at. I highly recommend that.
Assalamu alaikum. We apologize. The connection uh, then disconnected. Seems like the internet and the lights went out at the same time. So we're going to sit here for a little bit and see if the imam is able to reconnect, inshallah. So let's give it a few, inshallah. Just when it's about to get good. Mashallah. Right, Kat, Khadija? Just right when it's about to get good. So, alhamdulillah, so far we covered in 711 Common Era, the Muslims conquered Spain under the leadership of Tariq ibn Ziyad, and that period was called the Umayyad period, inshallah. So the Imam is building on this information, this history, because it's so important um, that we go over this because it's going to dispel a lot of the rhetoric and the slander that a lot of Pan-Africans spread about Islam. They make it their business to erase Islam out of our black history, our African history. And in fact, the information they project towards us is from the Orientalists, non-Muslims. You know, the ones that they call themselves not following, but they use their information to refute other blacks, other Africans that are trying to connect with their roots. SubhanAllah. Um, yeah, so inshallah, we're going to wait a few to see if the connection um, will resume. If not, that's how it goes in Gambia. It can come, the lights can cut off for a few minutes or a few hours. So, mashallah, it's one of those things. And if you're a serious student, mashallah, you will deal with the challenges when it comes to learning. Allah, if He wants to give you understanding, He give you understanding. If He wants good for you, rather, He'll give you understanding of the Deen. And every challenge, roadblock, or anything that you experience in learning, know that it's a great reward in that. Jahid to Shahid. Exactly. Exactly. So this is one of those things, and let's keep the Imam in your du'as that Allah increase him in being able to be, consistent and sincere in delivering this important information. Not everybody has the courage to do so, to speak out. And so, just like the other imams, Imam Amin and Imam Fahim, um, more brothers, step up and speak out, for us and and to inform the people, because we've been blinded, we've been bamboozled, like he said. Our brother Malcolm X said that. He said we've been hoodwinked. you know so we got to stop being hoodwinked and being had and start thinking. They took our ability to think. Not that they took our ability to think, we've been conditioned not to think. And so when we start thinking, we become dangerous. That's just how it is. When you a thinking person, a black person especially thinking, subhanAllah, you are a dangerous individual to mess with. Not that you're dangerous in the matter of violence, is that you know how to build yourself and your people where you don't need anybody. You'll be able to work in, uh, you could work in partnership, not being in the position of having your hand out and being at their beckon and call, or just being at the be subjugated. So if someone's over you regarding knowledge and economics, here's our imam. He's coming in right now. Alhamdulillah. There he go.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam to. Hold on, I gotta put you in here. Hold on. I was trying to hold it down for you. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. The power went out.
I figured that.
And I looked out the window, everything was black as far as you can see. SubhanAllah. See how fast it came back on?
I said it could be out off a few minutes or a few hours. We're going to see. We're going to sit tight till you get back, inshallah.
But Samira, this area right here is never been off for a long time. I can remember. Not like the other area where you last time you was here. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
So I think I left off when I asked you all who was ruling the time when the Muslims entered Spain, and y'all said the Umayyads, and that's correct. Little side note: it's important for part of the point that we're going to make later, but there's always, because when you're telling history, you can't you got to leave some stuff out, because every person involved got their own story, right? But y'all said uh, to Tariq ibn Ziyad, he was a Muslim Amir who entered Spain, conquered Spain in the year 711. A lot of people don't know that before that, about a year, maybe 2 years before Tariq ibn Ziyad went into Spain, there was another Muslim named Ta'rifa, from the same word Arafa, to know, like the verse in the Quran we were just talking about, lead to Arafu, like Arafat, Ma'arif, I don't know, right? The word Ain Farah, right? His name is Ta'rifa. He went into Spain a year before. It was more like a recon mission, reconnaissance. He was actually invited over there. Deep history. If you look at a map now of modern day Spain, right near Gibraltar, and Gibraltar, if you know your history, is the Romanization of the name of the place where Tariq ibn Ziyad landed at. Gibraltar is from the Arabic Jabal Tariq, the mountain of Tariq, the highland where Tariq landed at when he crossed from Morocco into Spain. Jabal Tariq, Gibraltar, right? Not far from there, there's a place called Tarifa. And this way you get the English word tariff from, like tax, tariff, right? But Tarifa was a person. And he came, just like Tariq ibn Ziyad came a year or two after him. He came recon. Why did they go over there? They were invited over there. There was a king at the time, a Visigoth king named King Roderick, who was based up, I forget which city, but he was based up in the north. And just like nowadays, when you have like a prestigious university, everybody wants to send their children to prestigious universities. So there was this other king whose name I can't remember. He was based down in the south, close to Africa. And he sent his daughter up to northern part of Spain to go to school. And to make a long story short, she was actually raped and assaulted by King Roderick. King Roderick, he's governing what we know as Spain and Portugal at the time. They also call it the Iberian Peninsula because it's a peninsula. When the daughter came back and told him what was how she was violated, this lower level king, right? He didn't have no get back. Dude violated his daughter. He went to Africa and got with the next power, the most powerful thing he could get, the Muslims. And he was like, hey, it ain't hard to get over there. It's right over the Mediterranean Sea. And all the armies in the north and the west. If you come through, you can have your way. Ain't nobody gonna stop you. It's clear passage. So Rifa went first, came back, reported. Oh, it's like he said. There's some spoils of war, some ghanima right here. That's when Tariq ibn Ziyad came. A lot of people leave out that history. And that part of the history is extremely important because you're going to see the flip side happen generations later. What's the flip side? Allah mentions in the Quran, وَأَتِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولُهُ وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ وَاصْبِرُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. Obey Allah and His Messenger and don't argue with one another. 3 commands from Allah. Obey Allah, obey the Messenger, don't argue. Right? That tafshalu. As a result of disobeying any one or all 3 of these orders, this is what you can expect to happen. The tafshalu, you will lose. Fashal means you're not able to complete what you start, or you always fail. And Allah mentions that term more than once in the Quran. Allah mentions it in Surah Anfal, the surahs that were the verses that were revealed after the Battle of Badr. If you read those verses, remember the Battle of Badr, the Muslims won. If you don't know the tafsir, you would think, oh, this must have been revealed after Uhud, because Allah is kind of admonishing them about what's going to happen if you get divided and all that kind of stuff. No. That was revealed after Badr. In other words, Allah is saying, you won, and this is why you won. You need to keep doing what you're doing. But a portion of them didn't listen, and Uhud happened a year later, right? So Allah says in the verse, obey Allah and His Messenger, and do not argue with one another. If you mess that up, you're going to lose. In other words, division brings about failure. And your motivation, your spirit will leave you. In other words, you won't have that himmah. You won't have that drive, that motivation to go forward. Disobeying Allah, disobeying the Messenger, and being divided amongst yourself causes failure, and it takes away your motivation. Then he says, "Waspiru, be patient." In other words, when you're doing what you're doing, you Being patient in Arabic or in Islam doesn't mean you sit and do nothing. Being patient means you keep obeying Allah and His Messenger, even if you don't see the expected outcome when you expect it. You do what you're supposed to do. Let Allah worry about the outcome. وَتَصْبِرُوا. Be patient. In Allah ma'a sabirin. And Allah is with those who are patient. If you understand what just took place with Christian King Roderick and all that, how did the Muslims enter Spain and was able to take it so easily? Because they were divided amongst themselves. They were divided. They were fighting amongst each other. And so, if you know anything about Islamic history, this brought about the period in Spain. A lot of people say this is the golden age of Islam. No, the golden age of Islam was during the time of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And then into that, the age of the rightly guided caliphs. From the death of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we've been going downhill ever since, with a couple of spikes up and down, but basically downhill. But when people talk about Spain, golden age of Islam, they're talking about technology and stuff. Because the Muslims came into Spain, and if you know anything about history, the Europeans were in their dark ages. How they got out of the dark ages is they started coming to Spain, learning from the Muslims, and taking the technological advancements and education and university systems and everything back into Northern Europe from Southern Europe, which is Spain. There were a couple of periods from 711 on all the way up to 1492. Again, this is not the Hijra calendar. This is the Gregorian calendar, CE, right? There were a couple of periods that were known as Muluk Tawa'if. Muluk is plural for Malik, and Tawa'if is plural for Ta'ifa. You know, kingdoms, petty or divided kingdoms. They call it the petty kingdoms or the petty kings. Because even though there were certain time periods where, yeah, the Muslims are ruling, but when you understand how Islam works, you have a Khalifa, and every city or municipality has an Amir. But there were certain time periods where Amirs were fighting against each other. They ain't have like one Amir governing or keeping everybody together. Or even if you don't have one Khalifa or Amir govern everybody, at least basic Islam, you're not supposed to be fighting each other, right? But you had these time periods where each Amir was beefing and fighting each other militarily. And so one time, a group of Muslims came back in from Africa, always rescued them. The Morabitun, the people of the Ribat. That's what Morabitun means. Right? The people of the Ribat. And Allah knows best. I don't know. I'm not a linguist, but I think that's where the term Moor comes from. Allah knows best. Right? I could be wrong. Morabitun, the people of the Ribat. Ribat is like a military fortress. They usually set up at the borders of the Muslim land. There's ayats in the Quran commanding us to be people of the Ribat, and there's many hadith talking about the merits of even spending a day in the Ribat, putting in work, military service, right? And there were even modern Jamaats who named themselves after this Jamaat, Morabitun, right? Morabitun came out of Africa and dealt with the petty kings, like y'all Muslims, y'all crazy. How y'all Muslims fighting each other, going to war against each other? Even if you look at it, the Amir of the Morabitun, Abdullah ibn Yasin, right? If you look at Subhanallah, all of this stuff is connected, and I have to be disciplined. I can't mention everything. But the Morabitun, when they came into Al-Andalus to straighten out the affairs of these petty kings during their time, they went there with a stamp of approval of the Mujaddid of the age, Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. We're reading the Ihya of Imam Ghazali now in the morning with Imam Amin. Well, they gave them a fight. They gave them an opportunity to fight for go deal with the deviant Muslims, causing havoc. Any case, right? Like I said, there were more than one period like this. And the last period that happened like this, the Muslims fighting each other, it ended in 1492 because you had a period called the Reconquista, Reconquest. The Christian Europeans are coming back from the north, taking Al-Andalus, what is known now as Spain and Portugal, back from the Muslims. And the way they're doing it is they're playing one Muslim Amir against the other. Hey, we know you got beef with him. We don't like him either. We'll help you fight him. All right, okay. All right. And they'll ride together, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, working together with a Muslim Amir to topple and knock down and conquer another Muslim Amir. Then they'll flip on him. Then they repeat the whole process again. And this happened, they got the entire Iberian Peninsula back, just like that. Divide and conquer. Until when in 1492, they took the last stronghold of Al-Andalus, which is Granada, southern Spain. And that ended 800-year Muslim rule in Spain. I mentioned before that they had a celebration. Spoils of war, they conquered the Muslims, it's party time. Who was at that party? Christopher Columbus was at that party in 1492 in Granada. And that's where he secured funding for his trip, the trip that he's famous for. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. CASHAPP, Dunya, Mariam. Was there ever a point where Europeans were content with Muslim rule in Spain while Europeans were benefiting from learning? Yeah, while they was benefiting. that whole 700 800 year period in Spain, you got to understand, like, it ain't like the Muslim Arabs, Berbers, and Africans came into Spain and then the Europeans left, right? The rulers left, right? The people stayed there. So you had Europeans there enjoying the Muslim rule in Spain because it was much better than the oppression than they were used to. And there's another part of the story that a lot of people don't talk about, but you can easily research this. A lot of Sephardic Jews moved to Spain during this period because this was the safest place for them to be. What's a Sephardic Jew? A Jew that can really trace his lineage back to Isaac and Abraham and Sarah, meaning they're from Bani Israel. It was during Muslim rule in Spain that the Jews revived the Hebrew language based upon the Arabic language. The Hebrew language died out. They revived the Hebrew language by using the Arabic language. And where did this happen? When did this happen? When Muslims were ruling Spain. This was done in Spain. I say Spain. Talk about Spain and Portugal, Iberian Peninsula, Al-Andalus. This is extremely important because even before 1492, Portugal was becoming a world power. Portugal was becoming a world power. And Portugal was the first European empire to bring African slaves directly into Europe and directly across the Atlantic. So we all know that slavery been existed for a long time. And it wasn't only African. And there were African slaves in Europe, but they went. There was another slave trading route through the Indian Ocean, Arabia, Turkey, and into Europe, not directly from Africa, Atlantic Ocean, Mediterranean Sea, Europe. It didn't go that way. The Portuguese started the slave trade. And not only did they start the slave trade, but the Portuguese, they gave legal sanction and religious support for the enslavement of African Muslims. The Catholic Church gave fatwas, papal bulls, they call it. They gave their version of fatwas, encouraging and talking about the religious merit of capturing and enslaving African Muslims and other pagans. I quote, Pope Nicholas V, he instructed King Alfonso V in 1455. I'm just reading part of it. He said, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens. Anybody know what Saracens are? Anybody type that word in if you don't know. I know what it is, but I want to see if any of y'all know what a Saracen is. And while y'all trying to figure that out, I'll spell it for you. Saracens, Saracens. To invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his and their use and profit. End quote. That's not the whole thing, but this is the relevant parts of it. So here's the Pope, Pope Nicholas V, instructing the Portuguese king, King Alfonso V, to do this, the African, as Zacharias said, Muslims. This is one of the ways they used to, one of the terms that they used to refer to Muslims. So if you see that word, they're talking about Muslims. So the church came on board and gave a religious fatwa that you're supposed to enslave these Africans. That was in 1455, even before the fall of Granada. 1492 is important because now there's no Muslim in the Iberian Peninsula. They did the Reconquista. The Muslims that didn't, Abu Abdullah and his family, they had to go into exile into Morocco. And the rest of the Muslims there became oppressed and they were to give up their deen. They were forced, literally. That's a whole nother time. They call that the Spanish Inquisition. Look that up, Spanish Inquisition. Where they were primarily targeting Muslims. They were forcing you into Christianity. And it also included those Jews I talked about. They were forcing the Jews to leave Judaism and become Christians. Look, Spanish Inquisition, look it up. Back to 1492. Now, Portugal is a full-blown European powerhouse. No Muslims to stop it. In 1578, there's a battle that takes place. The Portuguese tried to invade Morocco. They lost, but the impact was still subhanAllah. They lost against the Moroccans. And they called it the Battle of the Three Kings because the Portuguese king died and three kings died, two of the Moroccan kings. So they called it the Battle of the Three Kings. But this battle was deep because even though the Moroccans won, the cost of the war almost bankrupted. Remember, Moroccans are Muslims, right? Does anybody know what African Khilafate was in existence at the time? So we're talking about 1578. What African kingdom was on the scene at the time? Mali? No. This is after the Malian Empire. Good guess, though. I'll wait for one more guess. That was an excellent guess, especially when you think about where the headquarters of the empire was. You're on the right page, just not in the right paragraph. There was an ancient kingdom named Mali, yes. Songhai. Songhai Empire. That's Timbuktu, all of that, right? Which is in modern day Mali. That's why I said you the modern day country of Mali. So that's why I said, Anthony, you're on the right page. Wrong paragraph. Remember, these countries we have now didn't exist. There was no such thing as a country named Gambia, a country named Mali, a country named Nigeria, a country named Senegal. These things didn't exist in the 1500s. These are European creations. So in 1578, when the Portuguese tried to attack the Moroccan Empire, Songhai Empire was in existence. If you know your geography, Morocco is north of where the Songhai Empire was. We said that battle with the Portuguese almost broke them. So he knew that the Songhai Empire, they had gold, they had salt, they had all these things. They was living it up. So the Moroccan king Ahmed attacked the Songhai Empire. One Muslim empire attacked another Muslim empire. A quote unquote Arab Muslim empire attacked an African Muslim empire. This happened in 1591, where it actually came about. And the deep thing about it is, remember I talked about division before? I said the whole thing got flipped. If you zoom in, and I can't do it now because it'll eat up too much time. If you look at what was going on in Granada, by the time King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella was knocking on their doors ready to take over, there was a whole bunch of infighting there, right? Then if you fast forward to 1578, when the Portuguese attacked Morocco, even though Morocco won, there was a lot of infighting in Morocco amongst the Muslims about who's going to be in charge. And by the time Morocco attacked Songhai Empire, there was a whole lot of infighting among us who's going to be in charge of the Songhai Empire. Zachariah said, why did Morocco attack if they didn't lose to Portugal? Because even though they won, they were broke. It's kind of like in our modern history, right? You say, okay, if Haiti beat the French and was the first uh, Western government or place to kick slavery out and kick out the slave masters, right? Why are they in the situation that they are now? It's broke. And so after they kicked the French out the front door, they had to go back to the French in the back door to help run the government. Because a lot of times when people uh, they're motivated to fight, but they don't have stick to itiveness. They don't have consistency. They'll go to war and deal with the enemy, but they're not ready to do what it takes to keep a government going, to keep the infrastructure alive. That's what happened in Haiti. So they went back to the French and other European powers to help them. And so, they stopped slavery, but they got them on their neck, Europeans on their neck in other ways. So it's sort of like the same way. Even though you win the war, right? You may not have no more money to survive. And so uh, King Ahmed saw the Songhai Empire as easy pickings. And uh, so basically, he needed money. So he was basically pillaging. They didn't care nothing about them being Muslim. This is important because with the Songhai Empire out of the way, the Portuguese, after the Moroccans did all that, the Portuguese and the Spanish end up conquering Morocco anyway. So they won that battle. Then they went to fought against Songhai, destabilized the Songhai Empire, and destabilized all of Black Africa's protection, and then end up, because of all of that, losing to the Spanish and the Portuguese in the long run. And then you cleared the way for the Spanish and the Portuguese to get into Black Africa without no opposition, without no problems, without no resistance. So that's why you find the first people involved in what they call the Atlantic slave trade. I like to call it the European slave trade. Why you find the first Europeans involved in the European slave trade, the Portuguese and the Spanish. They were first. This is when they start getting slaves out of Africa, large numbers, in large numbers, because they broke the Khilafah. So from, they say 1619, that's just commercials and marketing. It really is about 100 years before that, like 1518, round about that time, you start seeing slaves come in to the Western Hemisphere. Then after 1591, oh, forget it, it's going crazy. So 1600s, 1700s, a huge demand and supply for African laborers backed by the Catholic Church. It's on and cracking. They getting Muslims and all kind of other Africans out into Europe, into South America, the Caribbean, and North America. The deep thing about all of this is that even though they were getting slaves out of Africa, remember the colonial period didn't start yet. How was they doing? How was they getting all of these slaves out of Africa in all these large numbers? They was paying local kings, African kings, for slaves. So my tribe fight your tribe. We got prisoners of war. All right, I'm selling my prisoners to the Europeans. They're paying top dollar. They are paying top dollar. And then you notice in the 1800s, the early to mid late 1800s, different countries start, well, really the 1700s. Some countries start prohibiting the import of slaves. They're not prohibiting slavery, they're prohibiting the import of slaves. And then after that, countries begin to stop or prohibit slavery. And then in 1884 and 1885, they have what's called the Berlin Conference. What's the Berlin Conference? Berlin Conference, all the Europeans got together and be like, listen, all right, I'm going to get this part of Africa, you're going to get that part of Africa. I'm going to get this part of Africa, you two, y'all can get that part of Africa. They literally got together, sat at a table, and carved up Africa. Literally. And the borders that you see in the African continent now are the result of that Berlin Conference. After that conference, they went in overdrive with the colonization of Africa, and they began to govern directly. Fight, conquer, and govern directly. When they start governing directly, see, you know it's a shift. First, they took out the human resources out of Africa with the slave trade. And once they stopped that, they got enough human bodies. Okay, now we need mineral resources from Africa. So now we got to go in there and set up our own infrastructure so we can extract all of these mineral resources out of Africa ourselves. That's what they did. They went in there, colonizing. That's why they came in there with all these business companies first, and then they came in with their military afterwards. And so I'm giving a lot of us, we don't know this kind of stuff because we don't know our own history a lot of times. And I say we, I'm talking about Black Americans, African Americans. We don't know our own history. A lot of Africans, they don't know their history. So if we don't know our own history, they don't know their own history, how you expect them to know our history? And how you expect us to know their history? You find a rare person that reads and studies and knows a little bit about it. But most of us think about it. We say, man, they sold us into slavery. And we have all of these weird cookie cutter ideas that if you really thought about it, it makes no sense. If you really thought about it, a lot of these things we be saying make actually no sense whatsoever. And so I wanted to give you all that background to show how we got over there, because I'm in Africa now, but how we got over there in large numbers and why they are here in Africa in the state that they're in. Even right now to this day, right now, right? Say, okay, this country, this African country gained its independence in 1960 such and such, and that African country gained its independence in 1960 such and such, and all all these African countries so-called got their independence, right? If you go by country, right, there's no independence. Those same colonial masters still run those countries. They just run it indirectly. They let the locals run those countries. I mean, literally. And if you've never been to Africa, you probably can't see it. You probably can't understand how or why they would let that happen, run like that. But just to give you something that on a smaller scale, so you can see how it works. You take any city with a large amount of black people, Atlanta, Philly, Detroit. You pick any one of those cities, and any cities I left out, any of the chocolate cities in America. You can even point to a time when those cities had black mayors. If you really know what's going on the ground, you know black people don't run nothing in them cities. even when they have black mayors and the whole all black city council and all that kind of stuff. They don't run nothing. In the black neighborhoods, black people don't own the stores that's in the neighborhoods. Even though you have a black mayor and black city council, none of the laws or policies go or are effectively improving the situation of black people, in those cities. So you have black faces in high places, but the situation is still the same. And if you know the mechanics of how things work, you know that those black mayors, those black city council people are not running nothing. You already know, especially if you lived in any of these cities, you know that, you know what's really going on and who's really running stuff. So, so I just want to give you some backdrop. So we definitely going to be here tomorrow. So I'm making a list of things we got in common, things we differ in. And so the first thing that I want to mention is with regards to Africans, they are extremely tribal. They see everything through the lens of tribe. Or I think tribe may be an offensive word now, ethnic group. Everything is, they see everything through ethnic group. The way most black people in America, we see black, white, and other, they don't see black, white. They see tribe. And just, I don't know, kind of it's not exactly the same, but if you look how America used to be 100 years ago, all the Irish were police officers and all the Jews were lawyers. You know, ethnic groups were like restricted to certain positions in society, certain jobs they had. You kind of like see the same thing here. You see this certain ethnic groups, they do that. They don't really do that. Those ethnic groups do this. And if somebody wants to govern, they will say something against another ethnic group and make the people mad and lose their mind. It's crazy. Now, obviously, that's something we don't have in common with them. And I say we, African Americans, black people, we don't have that in common with them because we don't know what our tribe was. That knowledge was taken away from us. And if you go back to how we began, that's a right. And in fact, I forgot to mention, this is one of the rights that the Sharia has come to protect. It's called Hifzun Nessa. I'll type it in. It's called the preservation of lineage. The Sharia, that's a right that every human being has. Everyone has a right to know who their father is, who their mother is, who they descended from, who they connected to. And I just gave you a couple of proofs in the beginning of this class, right? But they call that Kuliyatul Khamsa, or Kuliyatul Sitta, or like the five or six universal principles that the Sharia has come to protect and safeguard. That's why the word hifz is there, like Hafiz of Quran, the preserve and the protection of the Quran, right? The Sharia has come to protect the deen, number one. It comes to protect your life, human life. It comes to protect intellect. It comes to protect lineage. It comes to protect honor. And it comes to protect something else that I can't. Mal, wealth. Sometimes people combine honor and lineage together. They say it's the same thing. But so that's why they say 5 or 6, right? So it becomes the Sharia has come to protect deen, human life, wealth, intellect, honor, and lineage. And if you look at every prohibition, every command, you'll see at the foundation of it that is protecting one or more or all of these 6 things. Even when certain things that are normally haram, if they become temporarily permissible, it's because they're preserving one of these things. Like everybody knows that Muslims are not supposed to eat pork, right? It's haram. But if you're starving and you're about to die, and the only thing that can keep you alive long enough to get to normal food is eating pork, you're supposed to eat that pork. You're not supposed to die because it's haram. Why? Because Allah says, unless you force by necessity. And that's an example of how the Sharia has come to protect human life. You're not supposed to say, okay, I'm going to die, because this is haram. No, preservation of your life ranks very high, and so you're supposed to eat only enough to stay alive and carry on. That's just one example. So the African American, uh, his knowledge of self has been wiped away from him systematically in an organized fashion. So that's one thing that we don't have in common. But the deep thing about it, if you look in Surah Al-Baqarah, and I believe in other places, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he talks about how Pharaoh, Fir'aun, used to kill the boys and let the women live of Bani Israel. And then he says, that is a bala'un min Allah. That is a major affliction from Allah. I said, that's deep. Even though Fir'aun is the one that's of that level of oppression, Allah describes it in the Quran as an affliction from him. And so I say that to say that even though the slave trade and the horrors of slavery is a major affliction, if you look what came out on the other side, like when you dealing with a lot of Africans, like they cannot see outside of the box of tribe. They can't. Sometimes it's amazing just even watching it. You would think that, okay, that ethnic group is Muslim, that ethnic group is Muslim, but they're from different tribes. The Islam will prevail, and they will be brothers. That's only if your Islam is strong. If your Islam ain't strong, you see the tribalism and you see the attacks, and it's so easy to divide. And you be sitting here as a Muslim, scratching your head like, you Muslim and you Muslim. And y'all are in the colonizer system attacking each other. And y'all both Muslim. The reason why you can scratch your head and you can recognize it's a problem is because that problem was taken away from you. You don't know what tribe you're from. If you did, you'd be just like them. You understand? It's two extremes. It's a human right to know what tribe, what family you belong to, right? That's the middle, to know what tribe you belong to. Not to think that you're better because you're from that tribe. You're supposed to know. But now you see the existence of two extremes, at least amongst us, black folks, right? Extreme tribalism and people that don't even know their tribe. That's why it's important to come together. Because when you have one extreme, you have to bring about the other extreme in order to bring about a balance. You have to. And so that's one difference that I see. Another thing that I have down as a difference is Africans, even though we suffered from the same oppressor, European, those same Europeans that came and captured and enslaved us and brought us out of Africa, those same Europeans came back and colonized them. But when they colonized them, they just controlled the government and all of those type of things. But as far as the culture remains intact for the most part. Their cultures remain intact. As far as us, meaning that we were forced into the diaspora, we were stripped of the culture. That's the difference. We exist in a cultural vacuum, and we pick up the dregs and the worst aspects of everybody else's culture, in my opinion. But we're resilient people. We'll turn the worst type of stuff into uh, what's needed for survival. And I think this is extremely important. And this is why I think it's extremely important that a lot of us, and of course, when I'm saying Black American, I'm also including, Black people that like the Afro Caribs and stuff like that. I just like to talk in my own context. Usually, when you're talking about African Americans and Africans, you usually find people two extremes, and I personally believe these two extremes are, again, they're ill-informed, and I don't think they're really thought out too good. Among us, you find people that be like, man, we need to pick up and go to Africa. Just drop everything, look at what we're experiencing in America. Man, it's just time to pack up and go, right? You got that one extreme. Then you got the other extreme. I ain't going nowhere. All the Africans trying to come over here to America. Why look like going over there? They ain't got nothing over there. Staying right here, right? We built this country. There's truth on both sides of the argument. I think both of those arguments are extreme. But I do believe that enough of us need to come here to visit and or live so that we can at least see the different cultures that we were stripped from. You can see what you're missing. You can see what you were taken from. Because these places, especially places like where we're at now, Ghana, Senegal, Guinea, Mali, most of these places, that's where the bulk of the slaves came from. Or our ancestors came from. They weren't slaves, they were enslaved. That's where the bulk of them were taken from. And because for the most part the cultures remain intact, you could literally come back here and be like, oh, so this is what they took me from. Hmm. And when you come here and you see that, and you start thinking about what's going on back home, you be like, subhanAllah, if my people had this, they had that, they had this, our situation would change. By the way, uh, I'm open to y'all comments. Samira, you there? I guess Samira is not there.
I am here. Your son is talking to me. What did you
Okay.
say?
I said, do you have anything that you want to add to what I mentioned so far?
Not really, just a comment, because while you was away, I was, talking a little that, learning this information, helps you to think. Like we've been, been force fed this, the lies and forced to, uh, observe all these holidays like Christopher Columbus and all this stuff. And if you, by what you just covered, and you measure that against what, our children are taught and what we were taught when we were younger, it's like, like subhanallah, like that's a whole another discussion as far as the education system, but it's a whole lot that we are missing. And we, it's a reason, it's a reason why you feel disconnected. Like in the Dean, we always talk about, being disconnected when we've been told that, tasawwuf is not part of the Dean. That part of the Dean is to help you to be able to practice the other two. So if you don't have a clean heart and you're not working on your heart, then everything is just lip service and you just, just parroting. But if you internalize, what are you supposed to learn, then you are able to be sincere, because the shaitan is sincere in his being our enemy, right? He's sincere, he is diligent, he's consistent in what he does, right? But he's disobedient, right? So as a Muslim, I hear a lot, from Muslims, the sisters, like they don't benefit from the deen, like something is missing. And it's hard to let them know, this the reason why you feel so disconnected and you feel like this is not helping you in your life is because you were lied to. And you can't differentiate what you learned from something that is totally in contradiction of that, which makes sense. So it's just, it's a power. It's like a Pandora box, when you think about it. And so it's so important to be consistent and be diligent, and don't just like, okay, this is entertainment. No, this is our life. And if you want to be whole, you're going to be open to information, this information. And I'm not going to say new information, because this information is not new. It's been hidden. It's just new because you just happen to come across it. But if you try to explain it to someone else, they're like, where you get that new stuff from? I never heard that before. And so that's that infighting, like you was talking about the Muslims infighting. Then you got, the Muslims infighting about what information true is and what's not. And so we gotta, be more sincere. But you can't be sincere if your heart is corrupt. You know, far as learning and far as teaching, it's a upward battle, but it's possible, and it's worth it. And Allah will not, does not rather put on us nothing that we can't handle. Alhamdulillah for that.
This is why, in our upcoming Gambian tour that we are hosting in June, inshallah. Because you have a lot of groups, Muslim and non-Muslim, that host, tours to different African countries. Sometimes I be laughing, right? Because especially like when real famous people or rich people do the tours, somebody always get made a king, whatever. They do the libations, they get turned into a king. They have a big ceremony, right? This is like real funny, right? You gotta excuse me. Uh, I forgot what country that was. It might have been Nigeria or Ghana. I can't remember, one of the two. But this African tribe, they made a Chinese dude a king. It becomes like a hustle,
Subhanallah.
right? But our tour, we're really focusing on not only the Islamic part of it, but the Islamic part of the tradition that we were taken from. Now, I'll say it this way: the Islamic part, the African part of the Sunnah, the prophetic sunnah that we were taken from. Like for example, like we're making it a thing that when you come here, we're going to teach you how to prepare the ink and the board, the loaf, to write. Because you see the children learning Qurans and they're writing on the loaf, right? Some people are like, oh, what's the difference? Write on paper, right? Why you got to write on the loaf, right? No, you write on the loaf because it's some deep stuff going on there. Number one, a lot of times the way you make the ink is edible, right? So you look, for example, you learn in the Quran, right? So you write on the board what your lesson is, and you memorize, and then when your teacher says, okay, you got it, you can move on, you wash that writing off of the board into a bowl. You can drink it, right? You can drink it. And you know the Quran is a shifa, it's a healing, right? A lot of times what the people do here in the Quran schools is when they watch the board, when the children watch their board, they save the water. Because if you know when you have Quran water, you don't like dump it down the drain, same drain that, you know, defecation and urine, where it's going to meet up with defecation and urine in the sewer system. You don't do that. So you're supposed to that Quran water was the Quran. You're supposed to treat it the same way you would treat the Mus'haf, right? So even if you're going to discard it, you use it to water a tree or something or a plant. You don't throw it in the sewer system, right? But what a lot of women do in these Quran schools is that like they will use the water to cook with, right? Or they would save the water and give the water to someone when they're sick. So not only are you writing the Quran and you're reading the Quran, you're drinking the Quran. And so, the Quran is a whole body experience. It's just not some external body of knowledge that you're trying to memorize. It's a whole on a whole nother deeper level than that, right? And that's part of our African Quranic tradition that's still alive here, right? It was practiced in Arabia, right? But for some reason, the African Muslims held on to that. They still holding on to that in a lot of places. The places that the Wahhabis haven't tampered with yet. Right? So, uh, uh, so yeah, the point that I was making is that during our tour, we focusing on reconnecting or picking up what we lost during the slave trade, right? And bringing that part back over the Atlantic with us when we come back. So alhamdulillah. So our tour, we're not going to be, in no hotels in the tourist area and doing what tourists do. Nah, we're going to be in the neighborhood doing what the people do, stuff like that. So that's the intention. So if you're interested in joining us in June, uh, if you don't already, make sure you get your passport situation together, because I hear it's taking a long time for people to get their passports. So make sure you get that together, and our advertisement and registration information and all that will be out in a month or so, inshallah. So yeah, so that cultural part is important, because the cultural part is what freeze dries the deen. What do you mean freeze dries the deen? If you study Islamic history, you find out that Islam came to any group of people. They don't erase their culture. A lot of us, we have this weird Wahhabi understanding that, you got Islam here and culture there. You got to choose one or the other, right? That's not how it works, bro. It don't work like that. Islam is the filter, and your culture goes through the filter. Everything that's Islamic makes it out on the other side, and you can keep it. Everything that contradicts Islam gets caught in the filter, right? That's how Islam works. That's why Islam looks different amongst the Chinese than it does amongst the Turks, than it does amongst the South Asians, than it does amongst the Arabs, than it does amongst the Africans, even amongst all the different groups that I mentioned. The different nuances between the cultures of the same people, it looks different. So, that's a Wahhabi understanding, by the way. Right? They didn't mess with more than the Akida. They messed with a whole lot of other stuff. But the most important part that they messed up is the Akida. But this understanding, are you coming with your culture or are you coming with Islam? Are you coming with culture or are you coming with Islam? Uh-oh. He said, Abby, shut up. You're talking too long. Yeah, I was saying that what normally happens is a group of people, or an ethnicity, or whatever, they embrace Islam, right? And then you find that their expression of Islam is consistent with the culture they already had. It's not like they had like, okay, we're going to throw away who we were before and now we Muslim. Nobody's asked to do that except African Americans. Nobody. That's why you see the culture of an Indonesian Muslim is not like the culture of a Pakistani Muslim. And the Pakistani Muslim has a different culture and expression than a Senegalese Muslim. Different cultures, but they all Muslim. It's only us that are forced to choose. So one last thing I want to mention today on my list, and maybe we can pick up from there tomorrow. One thing that we have in common is we don't control our environment. In America, Black folks don't control the environment in which they live. In Africa, Black people don't control the environment in which they live. And what I mean by environment, I mean the government. It's only people. It's only people who represent the interests of non-Africans that run the government. And this is something that a lot of them don't see. And they don't see it the same way we don't see it. Look how we act every time a presidential election comes. And we think voting for a Democrat or Republican is going to change our situation. Every 4 years, most of us have the same thought. And every 4 years, we get let down. And every 4 years, we have the same hope again. Democrats come in, make promises. They say, oh, well, we couldn't live up to our promises because of Republicans. The Republicans come in, like, we don't even really care about y'all. But, we treat you better than the Democrats. At least we ain't lying to you, right? Because every 4 years, they do the same thing. They do the same thing over here. And neither one of us really recognize that change starts from the ground. It don't start from the top and work down. It starts from the bottom and works up. And we cede or we give up the little control we have over our environments, hoping or waiting for those people higher up to help us. And we give up control. So that's three of the things that I mentioned. The first two that I mentioned, I see we have some differences. And the last one I mentioned, I believe we have in common. And that's another thing. When a lot of times we be having these conversations, and we always seem to leave out who's controlling the situation. They said, man, they don't love us. How come they don't give us, automatic citizenship in none of these African countries? Hello. Once again, people you see in government in these African countries. Yeah, they in charge. Yeah, they run the government, but they don't really run nothing. Their former colonial masters run it, or their new colonial master, their incoming colonial masters run it. Chinese. And even like now, if you go around and you look at the stores, you're going to see the same thing you see in America. When you go in the hood where all black people live, and you go into that bodega, 9 times out of 10, ain't a black person run that bodega. When you go into the nail shop, 9 times out of 10, ain't a black person that got a nail shop. When you go into that liquor store, 9 times out of 10, it ain't a black person that's running that liquor store. It's the same thing over here. You come here, you're gonna see Chinese, you're gonna see Indians, you're gonna see Libyans, you're gonna see everybody else except black people. Talking about the stuff that's really making money. And in the same way in America, where the average person ain't woke, and if you try to take a stand and try to hold any of these corner store, these gas station, or these bodega owners accountable for the quality of service they give us, or how they treat us, or what they put back in the community, there's going to be some local unwoke person standing against you. Same way here. Same thing here too, Abdullah. A lot of Lebanese here too. And I got a lot of pet peeves about all of these groups that I mentioned here. The same thing I see when they set up shop in our communities in the United States. I see the same thing, and when they set up shop in our communities here, exact same thing, no different. Follow the money and banks. That's who's running the hoods and the villages. Yep. And the answer to all of that is sitting right there in plain sight in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went into Medina, yes, the first structure he built was the Masjid. Yes, the second structure he built was the marketplace, the market in Medina. There was already markets in Medina in the different quarters, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam set up a marketplace in Medina, and he prohibited riba in that, interest in that. So he took the air, he sucked the life out of the people that were sucking the life out of the people in Medina. We could do the exact same thing. We don't like taking baby steps. We can have our little mom and pop stores start out as small as we need to start it, and even if we need to barter to and to do business with each other. Like, man, listen, I got rice, but I need a haircut. How about we trade, right? We don't want to do that. Those of us who've been to prison before, we shouldn't have no problem doing that. We used to do it in prison. Like, yo, I ain't got no stamps, right? And I don't go to commissary till next week. I give you 3 bags of rice for some stamps. There's a whole economy a cashless economy in prison. We do the same thing. We're not thinking. And another thing that we don't think about is production. We got all the raw materials here, meaning in Africa. Everything you need to eat or construct or build anything is here. But the bulk of the people here don't produce anything. They let other people come, extract all the raw minerals, export it to their countries, manufacture stuff, and then ship that stuff back to Africa, and they got to buy it. We do the same thing over there. We talk about getting into various types of business, and we always talking about getting to the plug or getting the connecting to the plug, right? We don't never position ourselves to be the plug, to be the producer of whatever's being sold. But anyway, do any of y'all have any questions about what we mentioned? I know it was kind of heavy in history in the beginning, but I wanted to lay that foundation. So a lot of times we talk about or complain about how things are, and we don't understand how they got that way. And of course, I didn't mention everything. I don't know everything. I mentioned some key parts of the history, some key landmarks in history that turn the tide of history and how the world works and got us where we at right now. It's like if you're driving down the road and you realize that you're going the wrong way. You gotta be able to backtrack, see how you got off course, so that you can get on course. So that's why I felt the need to mention all of that information. And everything that I mentioned, like I said, I just skimmed the surface. If you zoom in and see what was going on at the time, you're going to find a whole lot of division and fighting going on amongst those people who end up being the losers. Say, I know how they say like a law of nature in Islam. We call that the Sunnah of Allah. وَلَن تَجِدَ بِلَا سُنَّةِ وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا. And you never find a change in Allah's Sunnah. What is that Sunnah? أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ وَاصْبِرُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. Obey Allah and His Messenger. Do not be divided among yourselves. Or more literally, don't argue amongst yourselves. If you do, you will lose. Your motivation will leave. Be patient. Allah is with those who are patient. Samira, last words.
No, that'll be all, alhamdulillah. I appreciate the class, alhamdulillah.
Does it seem like there's a long delay on today's show? Or is just people not engaging?
A little of both.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. So inshallah, these black lessons will continue until at least until Thursday. Inshallah, perhaps Monday, we will get back to Umdatu Bayan in the section of Aqidah, in the Sayyat. It's the the Deacon found one of those verses I was referring to. There's a similar verse in Surah Baqarah as well. I forgot what ayat. I know it's mentioned at least twice in the Quran. He says, "From your Lord." A bala'u. A bala is an extreme, like horrendous situation. Oh, I didn't even see this comment here. Abdullah said, if they have Shiite Lebanese there, I hope those Sunni African sisters don't marry them. I got to see about that. But I will say this, in most of these African countries, the economy is broken. Like literally, you wonder why there's all these Africans drowning in the Mediterranean trying to escape because there's no job for them. There's nothing. Like literally, I'm not exaggerating. There are literally many Africans who say, listen, I'm getting out of Africa, I'm leaving, I'm getting on a little makeshift raft, I'm going across the Mediterranean, I'm getting into Europe, and if I die on the way, it was worth it. I know it's dangerous, I know it's rough, but if I die trying, it's worth it. Anything is better than this. I'm not exaggerating. That's how a lot of them feel. In Gambia, they call that the back way. Like you don't take the airplane or you don't drive on a regular highway and use your passport to go from country to country. In the same way in South America, how they smuggling people and going through tunnels and all kind of crazy stuff to get to America, they got the exact same thing in Africa going towards Europe. They call it the back way. And a lot of men, women, and children take the back way through different countries in Africa, and they end up in places like Libya, right? And like in South America, what they call them, coyotes, people that's helping transport people and trying to get them to come to America. Got the same thing here, trying to get them to Europe. The deep thing about it is, like human smugglers, human trafficking, they get to Libya, they might get enslaved again. Like literally, they literally got slaves in Libya right now, literally. Africans. Libyans supposed to be Muslim, right? Most of Africa is Muslim. Right? They got black African slaves in Libya that's trying to escape and go to Europe. Then not only that, and you can find YouTube videos about this. A lot of times, these Africans, they get to Europe, and you got a lot of wealthy white people that's plugged into these networks, and they be having these nannies. They ain't got no papers because they came through the back way. So they literally have a slave. They keep them locked up in the house. They can't go to school with anybody else. You just a nanny. You just at home, babysit the children or whatever. You know what happens when you're in that type of situation. All types of wild stuff jump off. You can literally, there's been BBC specials, YouTube, it's all over the internet. And I got off on that because of Abdullah's comment. I mentioned all that to say that when people are that poor, they'll do anything for money. There are people that sell their own uh, what you call it, prepubescent or pubescent children. They will sell them to white tourists to have fun with. You know what I mean by having fun with? For some money. I'm not exaggerating. And we've had, I say we, well, they've had African Americans in tourist areas and seeing old crinkled up, old elderly, wrinkled white people holding hands with 9, 10-year-old little boys and little girls. Like, hold on, wait a minute. Something don't look right with this. Where's his parents? Who are you? Whatever. Oh, he's his dad. Nah, something fishy going on, right? You had African Americans calling it out, like, oh, something ain't right here. And there'll be an African intervene. No. No. I'm the child's uncle. And like, nah, get out of here. Don't run no game on me. You ain't the child's uncle. You and I both know what's going on. Come with money. When you broke and desperately poor, you do some strange stuff for some change. They've even done, I believe it was BBC specials about that. These Europeans that take what they call holiday, what we in America call vacation, a lot of them take holiday in Africa. And they be over here getting their freak on. And they know they come from European countries. Even if I get in trouble, ain't nothing gonna happen to me really. You know, right? I can do what I want. Pedophilia, I just get my have my fun. And the reason why a lot of these people are allowing it because they broke. Literally. Literally, families have sold their children to Europeans for money. Literally. They're buying homes too there. Exactly. That's why I tell them where my permanent home is going to be. Mm-mm. I can see that back in America. I don't need to see that here too. And you know the funny thing about it is I follow a few Gambian YouTubers, right? But these Gambian YouTubers, they don't live in Gambia. They live like some of them live in Europe and some of them live in America. And I remember that when one of them kind of like first blew up on YouTube, before she got her before her channel got popping, she one of the things that made her pop is because an African American came here. This African American was a troublemaker too, by the way, right? But in any case, this African American came to Gambia, was calling out that stuff I was just talking about. And so she went against that African American. Say, oh, us Gambians, we ain't racist. We love everybody, black, white, whoever. Don't come over here with that American racism, blah, 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 right? 1 year later, this same YouTuber is like, these people are disrespecting our country. These Europeans, these Chinese, these Arabs, they coming over disrespecting our country. You know, we got to stand up against them. What happened to we love all people, black, white, everybody? So don't come over here with that American racism stuff. What happened to all that? That's why I say a lot of people can benefit from our experience. We see stuff coming because we live in it. They don't see what we can see. And likewise, some things that we can't see that they can see. That's why it'd be beneficial to come together. Our experience uniquely places us in a position to see a lot of things that other people cannot see. A lot of stuff. There's certain stuff that we take for granted. We come over here, you come over to Africa, you be like, I know what that is. I see that all the time back home. I know what that is too. You ain't slick. Mm-hmm. But the people over here were like, no, they're really good people. You know, they they dug a well in the village and they really like us. Oh, really? Oh, really? You sell your soul to these people because they dug one well in your village. That well only cost them $2,000 to dig. $2,000 is nothing to those people. I saw in one video, I forgot what country it was. I think it was Uganda. I think and it was a hotel. And I'm trying to remember, I may be getting a couple of different incidences mixed up. It was either a white person or a Chinese person. Slapped the African. Just slapped him. I was like, you know you too comfortable now. You in Africa. Slapping the African in the face and not expecting nothing to happen. Oh, you too comfortable. Subhanallah. But it reminds me of how a lot of our sisters go to these Asian nail shops or these Asian hair shops and get slapped and beat up. And we'll stand out and protest. And while we protesting, it'll be another line of black women trying to get in there that don't care about none of that stuff. Same scenario. Anyway, I've talked too much. Inshallah. We're going to pick up with some other similarities and differences tomorrow, inshallah. I pray that this was beneficial. And so tomorrow we'll get to some more practical stuff, being that I gave you a little background, inshallah. And don't forget these channels, that's what we're going to be on now. Not Naeem Abdullah, my personal page, Imam Naeem Abdullah, my like play page, and the same two other pages we've been on, masjidalmumin and our YouTube channel. May Allah reward all of you for your time. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك والعصر ان الانسان لفي خسر الا الذين امنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر السلام عليكم ورحمه الله